Once again, part two, the modern campus. Is it a utopian community? What is it? What will it be after COVID? What are prognostications? What are backcastings? Can we jump up to that level 50 years from now and say, oh, we should have seen it, or we know where it's going to go? We had been talking about context, continuity, connectivity, and comprehensivity in terms of site and campus and a cognitive device. What I want to talk about is the crisis, or a series of crises leading up to COVID, which I contend is our friend. It's simply nature saying, I haven't gone away, I'm here. And the crisis of the university was a couple of things. It became a culture war of perceived historical injustices as embodied into the corpus, or what these traditional, mostly the great books, campuses were teaching in terms of humanities. And this is why there was a shift to the STEM subjects as neutral subjects, which didn't make sense to me because doctors have to make moral choices all day long. And two, on top of these well-meaning, well-placed culture wars, sometimes not worked out in the best debates, we have this concept that the four-year college is, some pundits have put it, a way of infantilizing young people again, putting them in a bucolic setting where they can drink, frolic, study, have sex, do all those things away from the parents. But basically it's anteing up at a poker table. They pay into the poker table to hopefully get a better future, or a better future of the people who merely studied plumbing and becoming an electrician. Often these people are earning more than the people who go to college. What's your weigh in on this year of COVID? What the perception of the college campus was as a place of infantilization, beautiful infantilization, noble infantilization, taking people out of a culture. And this is the criticism of monks and religious people in Christianity and Buddhism and so forth. Oh, you're not really adding to society, or in your beautiful monasteries and telling us what life means, and meanwhile we're cultivating the rice crops. Who are you guys but parasites? So that's been a constant criticism of the campus as a monastery. And then the future. We have the internet, obviously. We have acceptance of online teaching, both synchronous, which means we're in the same time but different places, and asynchronous, which is what this class is, where I'm going to leave these videos out for my students, and they're going to come back to it and they're going to react to it. So we have no real-time debate, synchronous debate with you and them. Maybe we can arrange that sometime, but this class is not scheduled to meet in the same time even. So we have these very daunting subjects. The three, the poker game monastery, just creating parasites and infantilized parasites, COVID, which was our friend, and now this whole thing that we can leave asynchronous, same time, different places, or different time and different places, as a way of being a fulfilling means of education. What's your weigh in on that from the standpoint of the aesthetic campus?
Well, there's a lot of things that have run through my mind as you speak and as I've thought about things. It's interesting to me that so much of what happens is, particularly in a student choosing to graduate from a well-known, respected, and noted institution, be it private or land-granted. The records of these places stand the test of time and become then something that you want to attach your name to and be a part of. So hence those institutions that have that kind of exposure and reputation now are
diluted.
Yeah.
Pay to play.
Yeah,
You're a rich guy. You pay. Daddy
Yep.
pays. Mommy pays. You can become the George Bush II. Where he's clearly a Yale guy, but how did he get to Yale? People ask that question. It was like, oh, privilege. That was it.
But I guess I'm more optimistic in the sense that I'm saying, well, yes, Mom and Dad did afford me an education. They didn't afford me an education. I had to work my way through it. That there was a level of achievement that was gained by that student who, in spite of what was the attraction to a certain campus, actually came out educated, became able to lead, and able to take a situation and break it down into, well, it makes sense this way, but not that way, so that they have this kind of all-around look at things. I think that's really important. What surprises me, and I've been watching it happen with son Andrew, your brother Andrew, he has put out over 6,000, I'm hoping I'm quoting him correctly, laptops to K level students. So one of the things that, and this I think goes with what we're talking about, is that whether next year, because of the exposure to the techniques found on a laptop, or
in a general acceptance, especially by old people.
Yes, that's right.
The gatekeepers said, what the young were telling us all along is true. It works. But does it really? They're not listening to the other message of the young people saying, we're lonely here, though.
And I think that is the problem. I don't know where it happens. I've often thought about, well, let's say, for instance, everything, or most everything, goes back to sitting down in your bedroom at the desk there, and you are online trying to earn 3 or 4 or 5 credits in some program. I'm wondering how that is effective. I mean, how can that be effective? Because I'm a face-to-face kind of guy. I believe in being able to communicate directly with the student. But I'm sure I've got to learn that too in my time left here on Earth, is to find the way in which we can somehow answer those questions about the personality or the personal relationships between a student and a professor that we've enjoyed. Okay.
But not just enjoyed, and here's one thing that I taught and traveled around the world, is that when I teach in East Asia, I miss the Socratic method.
Mm-hmm.
That there's a premise, and a conclusion.
Mm-hmm.
That I take the opposite point of view, not because I hate you as an individual, but because, and this is what people need to relearn about in the culture wars, is that we adopt these positions to come up with a third term. So we're not actually in these universities to enjoy the waterfalls and we'll enjoy them, but there's a cognitive aha moment, eureka moment of practicing these Socratic things, walking out to waterfalls, and then going, I get it, and I get it through opposition. I get it because the professor or a classmate said, you're wrong. And I said, no, I'm not. And so you come up at a third term. You might come at the third term near the waterfalls or on a little walk. I've been hired and taught at these campuses, they'll go unnamed, where he walked along a little stream and there's waterfalls, and you go like, oh, right, now I get it. So it's not only a country club, it's a place for these eureka moments, right? The
Yes,
campus.
Yes, yes, yes. But now, the question is that campus, is it one, it's, as we've said before, it seems to be getting to a point of being built out. Hence the the pandemic comes in, and we say, well, we've got to change our mode here. We've got to learn a new technique. And Andy's back getting his kindergartners used to working with a computer, and maybe that happens. I have faith in our humanity and our scientific community that we possibly might even have three-dimensional forms that add life to a relationship between student and faculty, so that these things happen. It may even be an experience.
That's my research direction. UX, UI, XR are these sexy little things, which basically mean either virtual reality, augmented reality, some form of spatializing where you cannot create that synchronous thing of being in the same time but different spaces. You can create facsimiles of that, so they become greater.
Yeah, and we used to teach many decades ago.
Well, just a few more minutes of this. What do we got? Yeah, a few more minutes.
Yeah.
So the back to the question of the serendipity of engaging in a Socratic way, humanities, but frankly also STEM subjects. There's a lot beyond aptitude. There's creativity in all of this. Mathematics, science, all these things. There's a great deal of creativity. So where would you find the aha moments in that?
In those situations?
Yeah.
I'm going to be surprised because I don't know exactly where it's going to happen.
It could happen in a little room. It could happen in the dorm room, in the shower, near the waterfalls.
Yeah, but that's how it's been.
But you think if that same person has to work for DoorDash or does a shift down at McDonald's, same brilliant student is, smart enough to know that he's got to pay off his debt, sometimes as he's doing, or something on work study, that the aha moment might even happen on the shift on DoorDash.
Definitely.
Or driving an Uber.
Or in the shower.
So that gets to the third point of we're almost done.
Sure.
So we said the poker game, COVID, the future, and here's just a little sort of terrifying graph of where society is supposed to go after our oil runs out. This post-peak oil sort of theory, also called the Aldovai theory or something like that, is basically saying the success of human beings, how we swelled up to $8 billion, has been totally conjoined with the harvesting of petroleum. And that once this tapers off, there are 10 calories of oil goes into making 1 calorie of food. And that's untenable according to supplies. So the university, the campus, even urban design, we need to be in greater proximity to food. Can we see these campuses become like the Italian 7th, 8th, 9th century monasteries where the monks were actually making their own food, making their own crafts, making things, illuminating manuscripts? Can we see the campus return back to not a abstract place where nothing really happens except learning, that these are actually productive places, kind of like a research university?
Well, definitely. As a matter of fact, when I looked at the photograph you sent of the backyard of your home, I said, gee, what a garden would that make? And we're finding statistically that there's more emphasis as a result of this pandemic on getting to the ground, getting to the soil, and doing your own growing of things. It certainly has been more of the do-it-yourself culture because there's nobody else that's going to be able to do it for you due to the restrictions that were imposed upon us. And even with the removal here in this state, Minnesota, where the governor has said, well, we don't need to wear masks and we don't need all of these protections, he is really talking to people who say, I'm not going to get rid of that mask yet. I don't think we're over the hump.
But ironically, this is one of the I teach at a 22,000 student university. This is one of the first years I never had any other illness.
Really?
At all.
Really?
Because
That's
of the
good.
mask.
Yeah, oh yeah.
So I'm not advocating, I suffocate with this thing, but that it's beyond what it's supposed to represent, societal control, the unhealthy corporate body. It also has its benefits in doing other things, ancillary benefits to this.
Yes. And then now your question goes back to then how does it affect the campus or the institution itself? I can wake up at night dreaming of these rooms, sans students, and a professor sitting there at his desk in his with a top on, but he's got his jammies on below, and he or she is talking about what they want the student to know or explore or think about, whatever, and then I'm saying, well, what do we do with these volumes of buildings that may not house 1,000 students in a lecture hall?
But essentially also were public works programs.
Yeah.
On an economic, certainly at the university I teach, Stony Brook, which is the largest employer on Suffolk County. So it has also fulfilled an economic function.
Definitely.
And then one of the last questions, I think, before we round this up was the talk of, along those economic lines, that, the professor, the specialist, the person who's refined their skill outside of the vicissitudes of markets going up and down and this, that, and the other. It demands a degree of embodiment, but it also demands a degree of hazing. To get a PhD and to go through tenure process is not the meritocratic system as it is intended. It's a form of hazing too. And as we conclude here, we want the campus embodied. We want bodies through the campus enjoying it, drinking, being away from parents, making still love, studying the books, doing as critics said, it's a place where they're infantilized. They're not working shifts at DoorDash, even though they are, or they're not raising families, they're not fighting wars, they're in these little monasteries. Okay, we go back to the professor. Is the professor with the PhD in specialized knowledge that's carved out with their snowflake niche, is that an antiquated object too, that a individual can embody with his biochemical process all that needs to be known apart from a computer, and that this whole subject is no longer a moving target, but it's a fixed target? And then that person gets to young people and say, here's the way it is, kiddies. Is that system of embodiment also gone? It's kind of a loaded question.
Yeah,
I think it is.
Loaded, and it's very complex.
Is one individual who happens to get tenure, go through all of it, is that place a terminus for that knowledge? And it shouldn't be.
Shouldn't be a terminus.
But the colleagues will say, but that individual goes to conferences. To do what? To agree with his friends, his or her friends? Is there, and just briefly, I was brought away with a colleague to be co-PI on adding a creativity to a curriculum in Korean high schools by the Korean Minister of Culture. It was a big-ish grant of $700,000. And basically, they said East Asian cultures have been built on this meritocratic, singular test. Chinese, you find it in China 4,000 years ago. You take the test, you become a public servant, worker, whatever the term was. And so that stayed with it. And basically, it was the death of Steve Jobs, and they said, we want one of those. They said, Steve Jobs was a dropout. Said, yeah, we heard all that, whatever. And it's like, he went counter to almost everything that was thrown at him. He said, yeah, we heard about that too, but just get us one, make us one. Make our system conducive to that individual. And what I found is there are many creative professors, huge amount of creative students, but they didn't have the logic open for it because they also had these soul-crushing tests that they had to do in terms of meritocracy, because that was their form of merit. There was a merit. A poor kid could become an advisor to the emperor just because got high scores on the test. So I said, you mean to tell me the only place we're going to allow for creativity is during lunch break? And they said, yeah, that's kind of it. And so we have, can a university with all these forces against it continue to be a creative place?
It can and it must. And it probably comes to the point where we can realize and accept and actually think about what you just explained, the situation of how that professor got to be a professor, and what
through this hazing, but also by accident through being an expert in his or her field.
Yeah, I often think how I got to be on the faculty at the University of Minnesota. It was way back.
Well, in pop culture, Malcolm Gladwell says you got your 10,000 hours in. The Beatles became the Beatles because they played 10,000 hours in the bars of Hamburg. They got their chops. So there must have been some place where you got your chops.
Yeah, I must have. It was interesting because I still wonder about the process. I did a lot of work to expand my background and knowledge. And then I applied to the University of Minnesota Department of Architecture, and I was accepted. And I knew an architect prior to starting school. I knew an architect who asked me to come in and do a 2-week project. And I did it, and at the end of the project of a class, so I don't think there was more than 20, I got a standing ovation. Well, it happened to be that the head of the school, Ralph Robson, was in the jury too, and he said, he told me, he said, well, you're not going to go to school here, you're going to teach here. And that's how it began.
The old days, the good old days,
Yeah.
which we talked about chronos over karyos.
Yep.
It's like he said, I made a decision.
Yep.
You're not going to go through this vetting, wedding, specifying over maximizing. We're not going to maximize you, I, he, him. Maybe it was a patriarchal culture. Maybe it was his white privilege and saying, I decided you're going to teach her. But it was a decision, that had to be made, was made. Fortunately, it was made. And I find that we're now in a culture of maximizing.
Yeah.
Does this person do, let's call down to H&R. Whatever. We need this, that, and the other.
That's true.
And it's all right. It's all correct. But I do miss the days of the kind of gunslingers who was like, boom, that's it. Let's not waste any more time. So that, in parting words, what the aesthetic cognitive campus, what is the future post-COVID? Now that we have people using iPads, laptops, me even using social VR as a means of communicating.
Well, I think that if we can get around and begin to accept and use effectively the virtual classroom experience where you're learning by way of the screen on their laptop, possibly in these campuses that are mutating and a way of coming close to disappearing, that there are probably several places still there where students might be able to come and congregate by maybe it's friends, maybe it's their age group, maybe it's their interest, the specific study program that they're challenging themselves with. But there needs to be a place for that. Now, that still doesn't answer the question, what are we going to do with the rest of those buildings?
Right.
And
we'd have to trim the thing here, but we can continue. Otherwise, it won't mount to YouTube. So I'm going to have to